I need to thank, and I would like to thank the Glimcher family as well to make this possible for me to come over. And of course I would like to thank the Ohio State University, especially the Knowlton School of Architecture. It's great to be here again. It's a very warm welcome for the third time. I appreciated you having me here, and I tried to stay as long as possible. I'm here now for almost 3 weeks. And I told Professor Lara if I would be able to come here again 2 years ago, I would like to spend as much time as possible with the students and have a lot of interaction with the students. Because I remember from when I was in college, when I was in university, that was something I truly appreciated if somebody from out of the field would spend some time and would interact with us. And I had the pleasure to interact with a lot of students, graduate, undergraduate students. We made some great trips also to Pittsburgh. I've seen Toronto. Also, I've seen Detroit, and of course, I did a almost 20-mile bike ride here in Columbus along the river, because I'm going to talk about water today. So I enjoyed that truly. And just to give you an idea, all the things that I will be presenting today, and as part of the being a Glimcher, a visiting professor, we will put this all together into a book, and we will publish that later next year as well. So if this nice image of Holland just rolled by, I want to start with my lecture. And I want to start with a couple of old images of Holland and explain you why I called my lecture Underwater Architecture. I'm not going to show you a lot of images of cellars or everything that happens under the ground, like we build something that is under the water. In fact, most of our country is below sea level, and all the things we do and we design in Holland as a landscape architect and as architects and as planners, we design with water. And water is a very important feature in our design. And if you look at these old pictures, this is the city where I come from, The Hague in the Netherlands. This is our capital for the politics. You could see that the Hofvijver, that is the area where the White House and where the Prime Minister would sit every day in 1592. At that time it was an important place, so water was important for status, and it is still today. And if we show some more old images of how water would be look like in the past in Holland, you can see the canals and all the waterways. Those were the highways before. We used them to transport all the goods, people, but also the turf and all the things we needed in the city over the water. And when it was freezing, and that happens a lot, it happened more in the past. Nowadays we don't have that much ice anymore, but last winter we had the pleasure to speed skate and to recreate on the water as well. So recreational on water is also something that happened a long time ago. And these are all famous painters. They got inspired by the water, what is happening around the water. And yeah, water didn't give us only the chance to recreate its business inside, but it gave us also a lot of prosperity in trading and discovering the world. Holland has a huge history in exploring the world. We went all over the world looking for different places, traded. We did a couple of wars as well. But a lot of the cities in Holland, even the unknown cities, have a very old and rich downtown center because of the positioning alongside the water, rivers or oceans. And Dordrecht might not be that familiar to the people here, but a lot of people know Amsterdam, of course. And Amsterdam has its wealth and prosperity because of the location next to the water. And this is a 1660, and the streets would normally look like this. So there would always be water present, most of the times for transportation needs, but also for hygiene and to get rid of some disposables in the city at that point as well. But not only in the city, in the landscape, in the daily life, everywhere there's water. Just to make sure that we talk about the same parts in the world, I just want to make sure that you know where Holland is located. So we don't get mixed up like Amsterdam is the country and the Netherlands is the capital. It's the other way around. Well, this is Western Europe. If we zoom in, this is the Netherlands. It is adjacent to Germany, Belgium on the south, and on the west we have Great Britain. And Holland is not that big. It's approximately 100 miles wide. It is about 150 miles high, so if you do your best in one day of biking, it's completely flat. You'll be able to bike from east to west within a day, which I did a couple of times. If we take a different perspective and we look at from out of the sky, and we turn the map a little bit, and we overlay it with the altitude map, you can see that where this darkish blue all the way to this greenish blue, that's all below sea level. So all this area, a big part of the Netherlands, is in fact below sea level. And we have a couple of major rivers running through the Netherlands, and those rivers, they have a huge impact on what happens to the water in Holland as well. So if I overlay another area to it, if it works. Let me see this again. Here. And you see this orange area, this is all influenced by some kind of water, water from the ocean or water from the river. And this is the area that is mostly 2/3 of our country that's being every day influenced by water and endangered by water. So we have flooding, we have drought, we have subsidence. All these issues will happen within the orange-colored part of Holland. And within this country, there's 16.5 million people living. And that gives us an average of 1,000 people per square mile in Holland. And for a whole country, that is relatively high. We're one of the most dense countries in the world. But if you think, and you look, if I take this map again, and then I point out that the major and the largest cities are all located in this delta, you can understand that water is a daily problem and something we have to deal with daily. I think that 2/3 of the people is living below sea level in Holland, and that is why it is so important to design and to think with water. So let's go back a little bit more and I want to explain you why and how we started designing with the water. And I'll start only about 2,000 years ago when we didn't have the techniques and we didn't have a lot of knowledge. The only thing we did is, well, we started looking for the higher places where there was sandy, the higher sandy ridges, and that's where we started living. We put our houses, and of course the church, most important building at that time, in the downtown, in the center of mounds. We call them terps, and they were located there high enough so that if there was a flooding from some kind of flooding, we would keep dry feet, and the houses will have dry feet as well. So these mounds were present at that time. And you can still see them if you take aerial pictures from a lot of Dutch villages, that the church is the highest place. So whenever you go to Holland and you want to have dry feet for sure, go look for the church. Most of the times it's the highest spot. But when I zoom in a part of Holland, you can see in the right up corner, around the year 1300, something like that, we made big money with exploring the world, and we started to reclaim our land. And we started to gain land and make land from the ocean. And we did that by creating levees, and we started to build levees around it to keep more areas dry. We made this huge levee around it. We had not the capacity to empty it at that moment. But during the time, we start creating and making polders. And more polders, that is a specific unit, so this would be a specific polder, are reclaimed from the land. And we started creating our own country. And this is saying that although God created the earth, the Dutch created the Netherlands. It took them a little longer, but we created the Netherlands. And if I zoom in 1600, and I have an old map to show you that, it's illustrative that although we never had a lion in Holland, only cows, the lion is the national symbol of the Holland. It's in our flag, and we are very worthy and always fighting against the water. And you can see that this lion, the backbone of the lion, is actually our primary defense system. Those are the dunes in Holland, and they're protecting us every day now from this water. And All the cities you can see on the sides, the cities as Leiden, Amsterdam, Haarlem, some smaller cities as well, but also Rotterdam, they were all protected by the backbone of the lion. And to put some extra emphasis on this metaphor, the manes of the lion are blowing towards the coastline. And people who know a little bit about Samson, well, you know what happened when they shaved off his locks. So don't touch it and stay away from it. But if I go on, in the 1800s, there were new techniques. We invented the windmills at a certain point, and even in 2000, you can see that a lot of Holland was actually man-made, and the shape of Holland now is because of reclaimed so much of the land. To give you another example, this is just above Amsterdam. It's called the Beemster. This is around, let me see, I think at around 1670 also, there was a lot of small lakes. And the thing we did, there was a lot of hassle to keep this dry, a lot of levees to defend, a lot of area to protect. So we said, well, what is the best way to maintain it and to keep it? Well, is start making polder, start making land. So what we did is we reclaimed this land, and if you zoom in on the maps, then you can see that we actually made this kind of land just by using the old traditional windmill in pumping out the water and gaining this land. And this also explains why a lot of Holland is below sea level, because we pumped out so much water, and all these lakes had, in the bottom, they had clayers or even peat area, so we would have a lot of subsidence. And the lowest part in Holland right now at this moment is minus 21 feet, and we're actually thinking about planning a master plan for a city, for part of a city right there. I explained that. Our office is doing that as well. I showed that 2 years ago. But that shows a little bit the perspective of how important it is to manage the water. Last example, the Harlem Aamir. Technology catched up, steam engines. We were able to have more capacity to pump quicker, pump harder. So this huge lake here, we use this kind of steam engines and steam machineries to take out the water, drain the water, and reclaim the land. And the Harlem Aamir, as it is called, it was born, and the Harlem Aamir now is the location where one of the biggest airports is. Schiphol Airport is located exactly in the Harlem Aamir. And as you can see in this cross-section, if this is the ocean, well, it's way below. So if there's a really emergency, don't take an airplane, just walk out or bike out. That would be my suggestion. But we say that this is, we believe in our structure, so we have to keep it safe. So after that, more technology and more thinking about how to defend our country. The red line on this image shows you all the levees we had to preserve and keep intact to keep our country safe. Oh, well, it's not that clear visible. It's about this whole line. You can see that all needed to be preserved. And that's quite a stretch. We have to make sure. And that is a lot of maintenance. It's a lot of money. So what we thought of in Holland is, well, let's not make this whole line, but make it shorter. So we closed that part, we built there a levee, a big structure, and we closed this part to become a fresh lake. And as we learned before, this is some images of how this levee is. We put a highway on top of it as well to make it accessible and to make the people not go around this lake all the time. But we started to reclaim land there as well. And new agricultural land, new farmlands, new housing, new villages. During the time, all these areas were reclaimed and we were building the Netherlands. And Almere and Lelystad, some of the cities here, are now we call them suburbs or satellite cities for Amsterdam. And this is where a lot of the people who work in Amsterdam actually live right now. So we are still quite happy with ourselves, but we got a big, big warning. In 1953, there was a northwestern storm coming from the ocean. It was also spring tide, as we call it, full moon. So we had the most of water entering and knocking on our doors and knocking on the defense system. And the defense system failed. A huge amount of Holland was underwater, a lot of casualties. Big parts of the Netherlands were completely underwater, and a lot of damage. And we told ourselves in 1953, this will never happen again. And we installed the so-called Delta Committee, the Dutch Delta Commission, who made a plan, who created a plan in making this whole delta, but also the whole coast of Holland safe. And the way they did it, this is their original plan. They provided this plan, is to close all the tributaries, all the bayous, all these areas, to close them all down for this part. Just make dams and big structures, as we did at the IJsselmeer before, close them down and make them as strong as possible. But also, looking at our existing levees, make them higher, wider, stronger, and also the dunes, the natural dunes, make them higher, wider, and stronger. So that would look like this. If you look on this map, the water would go in here all the way in the tributaries. You would have an actual delta or more estuary where the water would be interacting with the river water, the ocean water, and we start closing them down. But when we were doing this, the public and ecological and environmental people started to say, well, maybe it's not the best thing. Because if you make a big dam like this is one of those structures we created from out of the sky, you'll lose a lot of ecological value. You'll lose all the environmental and worthy ecosystems that live behind these dams. So maybe closing it's not the best solution. Maybe we should find another way, a new solution, and making it safe, but also make it open and make it ecological friendly. Because all the river water from Germany and all the way from Austria is entering our country. If we close it down, the salmon, for example, and all the other fish, the trouts, will not be able to go all the way up to Germany and Austria. So we had an international responsibility on this as well. So we invented the Dutch Delta Works, the Oosterscheldekering, as we call them, and these were just a set of doors. We said, well, let's keep them open, and just in case of an emergency, we would close the doors that would be in these pillars, and then we keep the land after it's safe. And typically this will be closed once in the 5 years, just to be sure. And this one is the last one of the Delta Works when we finished everything in 1994, I guess. This is the Maaslandkering. This is the gateway to the city of Rotterdam, and this is where all the ships and all the port authorities need to go through. And those doors, each as large as the Eiffel Tower, but it's 4 times the weight of the Eiffel Tower. Well, hopefully they keep us safe if another storm comes and enters our country. So we were very proud on ourselves, and we made a lot of stamps to show around the world, and a lot of people come now to Holland to see, hey, they're keeping their land pretty dry, they're doing a great job. The main question is, are we safe? No. This image was taken last year. This guy didn't have a good night. This is his house, and this is when just a lot of water, river water, came through our country. And, well, you can see what happened. So, although we have all these systems in place, although we have such a great infrastructure, there will be challenges on the short and on the long term. And not only in Holland, of course. I'm not telling this story because it's only happening in Holland. This is happening all over the world. Everywhere in the world, we will have, on the short or in the long term, we will have, and we have to face it, issues with the water, no matter what kind of problems. I tried to explain a little bit what kind of problems that would be. And I focus now a little bit more on the deltas. I'll explain you later why. But if this would be, if this would be a line, so you can see. Well, let's see, this is the water, this is the land, this is a river coming through. coming through. What would then typically be the problems? Well, first of all, you could see there's a changes in the river, in the discharges of the river. Sometimes it's more, sometimes it's less. We experience now very long periods where we don't have so much water, so we have a lot of drought. That's a big issue because then salt water is most likely to come in, and we have to irrigate a lot of the agricultural, but also the levees to keep them, to prevent them from failing, because a lot of the levees are made of peat. So this is an issue. Second one, the rain interval. How much is it going to rain? How often is it going to rain? And if it rains, how long and how much water will actually go on the streets and in your landscape? We experienced that last night. If you see the river right now, compared to 2 days ago, you could almost see the islands here just close to the campus. Well, now it's impossible to cross to see this again, and you see how much water goes through this river. Well, this is worldwide, of course. These things change. And then with the discharge of the river, it's not only about the amount of water, but also how much sediment is going through this river. Sediment, very important for deltas to grow and to make them more fertile. And in Holland, we learned a lot about subsidence. I'm not saying that the things we did were the most smartest things to do. We learned a lot about it as well. So we maintain our groundwater level as much as possible to keep it as steady as possible. Because if you drain it, if you drain this pump and pump very hard, like it's happened in New Orleans, for example, you get a lot of subsidence. And with this subsidence, your whole city is sinking and draining and going down. So you have to think about these kind of problems. And if the climate change is going to happen and there will be more ice melted, well, the sea level will rise. We don't know how much it will go. Just to give you an idea, if the South Pole would melt, how much water would we expect? That is not this much, it's not this much. It's about, I think, 3 times the height of this college room. This is how much water is in the ice caps in the world. So if this all melts, we, especially in Holland, of course, we should all move to Germany, maybe, but it's a big problem. But there's another reason why there's a big problem. If the sea level rises, there will be extra water pressure, and we have salt water entering our country. And salt water in the fresh country all over the world, where deltas are providing a lot of the food for the world, it isn't a major problem. So, our office works around the world. We work now in a couple of countries. I'm going to show a couple of, do a comparison between a couple of those, and I choose the deltas we are working in. And I know that Professor Lara organizes trips to Europe every year and to go around the country. Well, I'm a big traveler, and I like to go around myself as well. And it helps. It gives you a new perspective on the world, and it gives you new ideas, creative ideas, but it also shows you you're not alone in some kind of problems. And sometimes when you solve certain problems, maybe there was another way to do it that would be much smarter. So if you have the chance, travel and go around the world, as I am doing, and that's the reason why I'm standing here now as well. And that made me see a lot of the countries and also a lot of the deltas. And we believe in Holland, and if you talk to a lot of the people that live in deltas, the deltas are the best places to live. We pointed out the deltas all over the world. And if you see all these amount of deltas, and those are the 3 deltas I'm going to talk about, the Mississippi Delta, the Dutch Delta, and the Mekong Delta. And if you understand the fact, this image that goes with it, that 80% of the world population is living in the delta in some kind of way, well, there's something happening in so many years to come. And if you know that climate change is an issue and water is going to be an issue, there's a lot of work to be done. So we say deltas are the best place to live. The only thing is if you can deal with the water. As long as you can deal with the water, it's great living in these deltas. And to make the comparison between New Orleans, Ho Chi Minh City, and Southwest Netherlands, Well, to do this and to see it actually gives you a new perspective as well. At first you might think, oh, the problems are almost the same, similar, same amount of water running through the delta, same system. Coming from Holland and understanding the system, it's just itchy-bitchy tiny when you compare it to your Mississippi delta. This is all an actual scale. So you see that there's a lot of going on in this Mississippi delta. And understanding the system, how it works, understanding the system, how this delta system within the different places in the world works, helps you in finding new solutions and designing with them. And I made a little comparison underneath here. It shows you that in Holland we are quite moderate. We don't have so much high peak rain intervals. We don't have a lot of storms. We focused a little bit more on the edges, so New Orleans and Ho Chi Minh, so all on the edges of the whole delta. And you can see that, for example, New Orleans, they have massive wind peaks and massive wind speeds compared to Holland. We don't have to deal with that. And if it rains in New Orleans, for example, it rains much and much quicker. There's a question. Yeah, in the cities right on front where you have the water and the land touching. So we looked at those areas. I forgot to click this one. And if you make a comparison, there's also a lot of similarities to it, of course. New Orleans started at the basis of the river on the sandy ridge, like I showed before in Holland. The French, they came there, they looked for the higher places to get dry feet. And this is how it looked like in 1798, just before Katrina. This was New Orleans at that time. They would just build all over the place, and they have invaded this whole marshlands that are in New Orleans. Same of Rotterdam, 1340. It's a small village. Nothing happened there. You would know everybody living in Rotterdam. Well, nowadays that's different. It's one of the largest ports in the world. So it's a huge harbor, a lot of economic developments, and this river still an important feature to it. And we look at Ho Chi Minh and Saigon in 1947. Again, it was the French that organized here the city. So you see a lot of similarities between Paris and Ho Chi Minh in the way the city streets and the streetscapes was set up. But nowadays in Ho Chi Minh, in Asia, it's growing, it's booming. They go so quickly. So there's a lot of similarities, but then there's again a lot of differences. Because when you go look at New Orleans and after Hurricane Katrina, we could not have imagined this amount of damage done to a city. We had this flooding in Holland, but this magnitude, that was horrible to see. And then also the way they treated this water and how they start thinking about the water is completely different. They will build the biggest pump in the universe, as they would call it, the Army Corps of Engineers, just to get rid of the water as quick as possible. And they will build high levees, high walls, just to protect them from this water. Well, it's these kind of walls that tripped over and that made New Orleans vulnerable and made New Orleans flood. And what it does, these walls, is get people more and more disconnected to the water. So if you're a child and you want to touch the water, well, good luck. You have to climb over the wall. And sometimes the developer thinks, let's make a wall a little bit more prettier. So they do this, but that's just lipstick for gorilla. That doesn't work. So when you go look to Ho Chi Minh, where I was about half a year ago, this is a picture I took, just on a regular basis, twice a month, 4 times a month. They have water in the city. This is a new urban development. And they accept it. They think, yeah, it's not a big deal. The only thing, if I sell products, I have to put my products a little bit higher so they keep dry and the people will come next time. Different way about thinking about water. And defense techniques are so small. It's not about big levees. It's just having this wooden structure in front of your house or even making this levee just in your front yard by clay a little bit higher. And in Holland, we do it differently. We keep polders, and we now actually, this is also a picture from last year, we put them on the water just to store this water, and we deliberately make the water go into these polders for not letting the cities that were under threat overflow as well. I'll get back to that in a moment. And we're using new techniques now, and we're using nature in Holland to work for us and make our country safe. This is the so-called sand engine, and we made this sand engine. It's a whole pile of sand in front of the coast, and storms and wind will take the sand and put it all the way along the coast, so then we have a natural growth of our dunes within our coast. These are new techniques that we are currently doing in Holland. So going back to the Delta Commission, we now have a new Delta Commission. And now I'm starting to get to some projects we are doing now in Holland. The Dutch Delta Commission was established in 2008, national again, and they said we're going to do it again. We're going to make a new Delta Commission, but instead of fighting the water, we are now going to work with the water. And we are going to adapt to all the things that are going to happen to us. And the first thing the Delta Commission did was to accept and say climate change is not negotiable, it's not disputable. Climate change is going to happen. We're going to have climate change in Holland, and we're going to have a sea level rise. There will be future challenges, and we choose to do it on a national scale. And our perspective, where we look at, is not 20 years, it's not 40 years. No, the short term is 2050. 2050 is the short term where we're looking at, and the long term is 2100 and even 2200. So we're making a long-term perspective on how to keep our country safe. And it's these kind of drawings that go with it. And when you look at the principles the Dutch Delta Commission made, some of the advices they gave is, well, first of all, let's not try to fight the water and block the water, but work with the water. Give it room in some places, and other places where we really need to get the water out, then we maybe think about new solutions in fighting the water, in keeping the water out. It should be a long-term perspective and flexible strategy. We don't know what's going to happen. We don't know it's a black box or a glazed bowl. We don't know how the future is going to look like exactly. We have an idea, an estimate, but we need to look for flexible strategies to adapt to it in the future as well. And we're going to make money available for it. Every year, $2 billion is available to implement this. And as I said, we try to work with the water. So building with nature along our coast, this is the sand engine I showed, and also room for the rivers. Give this river more room. Invent new concepts for levees and dikes, and think about sustainable strategies and smart technologies in the future as well. So invest in research and in good college also to educate more people on how can we make our delta safe. And then the last one I highlighted is, if you do all this, what is the effect on the landscape? And I'm a landscape architect. I work in this landscape. If water is infecting us on this and water needs more space, it's going to have a spatial impact as well. And that's difficult for us. That's difficult for a landscape architect to think that way. And to explain you what I mean with it, I come up with this image. I'm going to ask you right now what you see in this image. Young woman. What do you see? Old woman. Do you see the young woman or the old woman? If you see this nose of this nice looking lady with the ears, and here's a chin and a little bit of the eyebrow with a big head, then you see the young lady. But if you see this is the large nose with the mouth, and here like a puckle, we call it in Holland, a zip on your nose, you would see the old lady, the witch. It's just depending, how do you look to this? Next image, the first one who sees it, please say what you see. Live, yeah. Lift, sorry, lift. Some people just saw the black patches first and didn't see the word lift in it. Well, similar if you look in the southwestern delta where you are working now at water and in land. Most of the times we are looking at the water only, the water engineers, and they don't look what it has of an effect on the land. And the other way around, if we as planners and landscape architects think about how we design this land and we think about how we plan our site, we don't usually look at how is the water related to this. So and that is why the Delta Commission asked landscape architects and asked our office to be part of a team and to start looking at this part of Holland and come up with how can we make a flexible strategy for this part of Holland. And we do that by looking at scenarios. Scenarios is something that you cannot have a really grip on. It happens to you. And we have two lines of that. We look at the climate change is just minimal, slow climate change. So there's always climate change, but slow, or rapid, a quick climate change. Or you look at socioeconomic growth or socioeconomic squeeze. And we call them different scenarios. We call them quiet, warm, busy, and steam. And you can imagine in steam, you would have a huge economic growth with a lot of climate change. So this way, you will have a lot of investment to fight against climate change. On the other hand, when you have quiet, you have people going away in your country. You have less people, less means, but there's also a little climate change. So how are we going to adapt to that? And we had a lot of numbers going to it. So we looked through we looked at it holistic. We tried to look at it in a holistic way, like looking at the number of peoples, economic growth, the amount of urbanization that would take place, amount of agriculture, the amount of ecological values, and then also the numbers of the water discharge and the water that we needed to store. And we put this all in images, just images. We tried to implement them, and we made those images, like this is quiet, as we call 2100, possible ways of how to deal with the water, how Holland would look like if those scenarios will happen to us. This is not a strategy, this is a scenario. So if business as usual will happen to us. And we use those images to the politicians to make it negotiable, discuss about it. If we know all this has happened, if this is an image of the future for this part of Holland, how can we get there or how not to get there? What is the strategy that we're going to apply? And we're now thinking about strategies. How and what kind of strategy, if this scenario is coming to us, what kind of strategy, what do we take into an account and how are we going to use it? Is it let everything overflow, so we have the water everywhere, or are we going to make a big door, for example? Well, we are now working on those things for the national, for the government. To show you how it looks like if I zoom in a little bit, I'll give you a first example. And this is an example that will be shown at the IABR, International Architecture Biennale in Rotterdam, which is currently, was a week ago, it was opened officially. And I encourage everybody who comes to Holland this year to visit it. It's a huge exhibition of all the projects all over the world. It's not only the Delta, it has a lot to do with urbanization all over the world. And we thought it's also interesting to see how water would look like in this. This is the actual situation in India. If you heard about the Delhi belly, which is when you get there you feel sick, it's because of this water that is contaminated. It is very difficult there to have clean water in New Delhi. And if you have your sewage, open sewage system, and you let all the sewage go into your groundwater will be affected as well. So suppose business as usual in 2050, I don't think there will be enough drinking water in Delhi, and this will be a social problem. And if you have unplanned groundwater extraction, as is happening right now, the groundwater tables in Delhi and also in greater India are going down a meter, that's 3 feet every year. You cannot do that for the next 40 years. You'll have big problems. And also the sewage, the treatment capacity is not enough. Leaking into the underground. All those things, when people are starting to wash themselves on the street, and also the effect of urban heat island in the cities, water is an essential thing in this as well. So we showed them during a charrette how the city is organized now with the water. It's hidden. They take so much water from here, so the groundwater is dropping down. There's minimal infiltration, a quick disposal of rainwater. And we zoom in a little bit to the other side of the city's schematic. You can see that the drainage has nothing to do to store and retain water as much as possible. We think that in Delhi 2050, it should be more like this. Still prosperity in a wealthy city, that's what they want. And we can understand that, of course. but on the other hand have more rain gardens, have more local wastewater treatments, keep the river, for example, this certain width, but let water infiltrate as much as possible. Don't take up so much water here. Use of green roofs, use of green spaces in the area, and that's where the landscape architect is of course very important as well, to design them in a certain nice way. These are the issues that are very much important in the future. And we believe in this in our office. And as I said before, girls are now up to university, so we pay for 2 girls all the way to university, and they will go back into the program, and they will now teach more and more people in living sustainable as well. So this is what we do with our office in Kenya with those girls. It's very cool to go there and see those happy smiles and happy faces when you go back there. So this is in general. I want to give everybody this message, but specifically the designers here in this room. I have this image of this guy in this box. I always try, when I'm working, try to look and think outside the box, to have an open mind and go with this kind of mind flow into the world. And that will make you a great designer, I think. I thank you very much for your attention.